So my name is Dr. Menzmer, Mitch Menzmer. I am a professor here of chemistry at Southern Adventist University. I just thoroughly enjoy being able to interact with students. And my role as a professor is to both try to get the best understanding of the things I teach, but also to try to find the best way to share those things with other people. Yeah, so the title of my talk is Thermodynamic and Other Misconceptions, a strategy for picking right fruits. That's maybe an interesting combination of thoughts there. Now, I've been teaching thermodynamics at a college level for over 3 decades. One of the laboratory experiments I teach in my upper division physical chemistry course involves finding, don't worry about all the details here, okay? It's just to sound fancy, all right? Okay? Sound like I know what I'm talking about? To find the critical point, the enthalpy of vaporization in sulfur hexafluoride gas. We do that. It's a great lab. It's a very sophisticated experiment, and success requires a firm knowledge of known scientific laws and scientific methodology, and I expect that of my students. That my students have to be Bible-based creationists in order to be successful in this experiment. What if my class consisted of some who were Seventh-day Adventists, some Christians of other faiths, other denominations, maybe some Jewish people, Hindu, Islamic, or atheist? Would any of these be at a disadvantage because of their faith or belief system in my class? I think not. Each of these would have the same opportunity for success, assuming they were well prepared. As long as they've done their homework, they should come out all right. And I would expect a fairly uniform expectation of results. Pretty much the kids are all going to get the same result as they should if they've done it right, okay? Would the faith perspective of any of these students influence the scientific practice necessary for their success in their lab? I think not. What makes it that way? Why is it like that? Consider, now this is our apparatus right here. The studied system is sulfur hexafluoride gas. Why that gas? Because it's cheap and it works good for the experiment. Okay, it's practical reasons. It's isolated in a thick-walled glass capillary surrounded by a plexiglass container filled with temperature-controlled water. All the variables that influence the behavior and state of the gas are controlled: the volume, the pressure, the temperature, the quantity, and the process of changing the variables to see what happens in the study can be repeated. A scientific method is optimized when these three things can be directly applied to the system under study. Number one, the system can be isolated. Number two, the variables that influence the system can be controlled, and we can repeat the process as many times as we want. Under those conditions, the scientific method is optimized, and that's what we try to do in those laboratories. It's because the methodology is so directly applied to the system. However, that doesn't mean we can't apply scientific methodology to things that are less direct, okay? For example, in forensic science or archaeology, okay? Archaeology, we can't go back and repeat history and see what happened a million times. We just have to look at the evidence and deduce from it what we find. And the scientific method can be helpful. Okay? But it is indirect. And so when things are indirect, we have to rely on something called assumptions. Okay? We become more dependent on assumptions the less direct we can apply the method. It's just common sense. So, as I mentioned, I expect a uniform outcome of results from my students in the sulfur hexafluoride gas lab so long as they have knowledge of the scientific principles and practice involved, regardless of their faith or philosophical worldview. But can I expect the same hypothetical group of students to have a uniform outcome of results if they were to carry out research on the origin of the universe or the origin of life? We can't just go back in time and create another universe to see how it happened. Okay, right? It's a very indirect process. Methodological science, by the way, is a biblical origin. Scientific method, as rightly practiced, can be shown historically to come from biblical creationists. We can isolate, control, and repeat the process, then no matter what your faith is, you're going to get a fairly uniform conclusion. But if we switch on over to some other areas, in these areas we call unobserved singularities, things that happen just once and nobody saw it. Okay. Then we don't get the same set of conclusions. It's all going to be based on certain assumptions about what you believe about the beginning of the universe and the beginning of life. Okay? It's influenced that way. So I don't expect I'm going to have a uniformity. Why is there a loss in the uniformity? It has to do with how directly or indirectly the scientific method can be applied to the system. How easy is it to isolate and control and repeat the actual origin of the universe? Okay, not likely. Not very practical. Again, I'm not suggesting that nothing can be gained in these studies by scientific method, but there's awful lot of room for assumption in that practice and personal belief. In such cases where the method can only be applied indirectly, outcomes become dependent on assumptions and beliefs. The less direct the application, the greater the influence of beliefs and outcomes. Creation is crucial, but no less so are kindness and credibility. There's an argument somewhat frequently used by creationists as evidence against evolution that goes something like this. Life could not have emerged spontaneously from non-living matter given the second law of thermodynamics. We're going to get a little technical here, but hang on, okay? If you like a roller coaster, you'll be fine. Just hold on to the bar. But what of the second law? What does it actually say and not say? What is the realm or domain of that law? What does it actually speak to and not speak to? And finally, how does it actually apply to the possible emergence of life from non-living matter? First, we need to establish just exactly what the realm of thermodynamics is, what it does and doesn't speak to. Thermodynamics deals with quantifying the level of organization and energy of a system at some point, some initial point, and the same thing at some final point, and the difference between the two. That is the realm of thermodynamics. That's what it speaks to. Okay? But there's another realm, a second realm that's different, and that's the green line right here. This is the realm of pathway. This has to do with how we get from this point to this point. That's a different realm. Okay? All right? They're complementary, but they are different things. They're just simply different things. Let me illustrate the idea here. So let's say we're going to go for a hike today, and we're all going to meet down at the Village Market parking lot. Okay? And the elevation here, I'm just going to make this up. Let's say it's 50 feet above the parking lot. Okay? So we're at 50 feet, the parking lot's 0, and the difference between the two is 50 feet. Okay? And that's going to stay the same no matter what. But how we get down there, everybody's going to take a different pathway. All right? Some people might stop by their car on the way down to pick up a coat. Somebody head to the restroom for a bit, get a drink, go by some of the booths, chit-chat along the way. There's as many different pathways down there as there are individuals. And it doesn't matter what pathway we take. What the duration of our pathway is, how long it is or how long it takes, the difference between the two stays the same. Okay? They're two different things. And thermodynamics, the analogy is that thermodynamics speaks to the initial state of organization and energy in the system, the final state, the difference between the two, but it doesn't speak to the pathway of getting from one point to the other. That's another domain of science. It's a different domain. They work together, but they are different. In scientific work, the pathway or process is a domain different from but complementary to that of thermodynamics. In chemistry, the study of pathway is referred to as kinetics and mechanism. This happens to be my main area of research in chemistry. What I study is how the atoms in a molecule rearrange themselves as they go from one state to the next state. I study the green line. Okay, that's what I study. Okay? Thermodynamics plays a big role in my work because we need to know the initial and final states, but my focus is on the steps of how that happens. So, item number 4 in the handout. So what does the second law of thermodynamics actually say and not say? The second law deals with a quantity called entropy. Entropy deals with both the level of organization of a system And whether the level, let me just read this how it goes here, whether the level of organization is specified or random, as well as the energy, the degree to which the application of energy to a process is specified or not. A system with a high level of specific ordering of matter and energy being applied very specifically to processes would be one of very low entropy. In simplest terms, if it's highly organized and very functional, it's low entropy. So entropy actually speaks to the level of disorganization or randomness. A system with a highly random, non-specified ordering of matter and no specific application of energy to any process would be one of very high entropy. In simple terms, high specificity is associated with low entropy, and low specificity is associated with high entropy. So does the second law actually say that a system cannot go spontaneously from low to high specificity? Okay. From disorganization to organization. Does it say that that can't happen, is the question. Well, I can appeal to my wife, who is from Michigan. And they have an event there every winter. And so does Wisconsin and Canada and other places have this event. It's called freezing. Okay, all right? Water in its liquid form is very high entropy. It's very disorganized. It's very fluid. It doesn't have much structure. Okay? Ice, on the other hand, does have a considerable amount of structure. There's only certain ways that the water molecules can stick together to form that ice. Okay. And guess what? I think she'll tell you it happens spontaneously every winter. All the lakes, all the rivers go spontaneously from low organization to high organization. It happens. Okay. There's lots of things in this world that happen that way. So we need to think very carefully about exactly what the second law does say. Okay, liquid water which prevails in summer is very high entropy state, non-specified, very random, yet it spontaneously changes into a much lower entropy state as ice, very specified organization, and it's ubiquitous. The second law actually says that a system cannot go spontaneous from low to high specificity without energy loss. Okay, without energy loss. So here's the deal. I got my water. It's probably running around maybe 60, 70, 75 degrees. We take some heat out. There goes the heat. Cools down, turns to ice spontaneously. Okay? So the second law says you can't have low organization to high organization without heat loss. If you stop the heat from coming out of water, it won't freeze. Okay? That's just that simple. If you take your device, you can feel there's heat coming out of it. If you somehow stop that heat coming out from that device for a long period of time, you're going to kill it. Okay? All right? So it has to do with that heat flow. Summarizing that, rather the second law says that the system cannot go spontaneously from low to high specificity without heat loss or energy loss. And indeed, as water cools down, we see that's exactly what happens. It's important to note that the second law does not say that all systems will go from low to high organization with energy loss. It simply allows for it, and in some cases can actually predict it. A little clarification on the thermodynamic understanding of spontaneous would be helpful. In thermodynamics, spontaneous has to do not with the speed or rate of a process or the automatic starting of a process. It has to do with direction. What direction is something going to go? All right, so not speed. For example, combustion is a spontaneous process, thermodynamically speaking. But none of us is concerned about having a few emergency candles in a drawer in the kitchen going to burn the house down. Okay, all right? Because even though combustion is spontaneous, the reason it doesn't happen is because it is so slow. Okay? And it takes a kick of energy to get that candle going. That kick is the green line. Okay? The green line. We got to put some energy in to get it over the hump, to get it started. And once it starts, then it keeps rolling. Diamond and pencil lead are the same chemical element. that's just two different forms of the exact same thing. They're both carbon. Okay? So which one of those two do you think is the more thermodynamically stable state? The diamond or the graphite? It's the graphite. The graphite. Okay? Well, why don't I see my diamond turning into a pencil? Okay? Because it is so slow. Okay? It is so slow. The pathway, the hump for the pathway would go up through the ceiling and out halfway to the moon. And when that pathway is really high, well, think about it. Let's say we're headed down to go back to the scene where we're headed down to the village market. Let's say there happened to be, 1,000-foot cliff we had to scale to get there. It would take us longer. Okay? That's what this hump represents. The speed of a process. High hump, slow process. So diamonds aren't really forever, they're just for a long time. Okay. That's the deal. Okay. All right. So pathway is important. Okay. Again, that's not thermodynamics, that's pathway, two different areas of science. So what about the origin of life? Does the second law of thermodynamics prove or provide evidence that it's impossible for life to emerge spontaneously from non-living matter? Let's try an application that's more common. The beautiful coneflower in my garden. The coneflower is a highly organized, specified state. Where does it come from? From what materials is it made? Carbon dioxide, water, a few minerals, heat, and specific wavelengths of light. Those are all non-living things. And yet, just like it says in the Bible, the seed sprouts and grows. That's the direction it goes, right? Like the plant, it starts here with non-living stuff, it ends up living, okay? That's the domain of thermodynamics. And thermodynamics does not prevent something like this from happening. Something else does, but not thermodynamics, something else. I think you already probably know what that is. So, the initial state, yes, non-living, final state, living, and the difference between the two. The flower, final state, is a living system, extremely high specificity, non-random in the arrangement of the matter and the application of energy in that system to very specific tasks of arranging the atoms, so we get a flower. So the question becomes, what is the spontaneous direction of the process? Non-living to living. That's the direction it goes. We find the same thing in the scripture. So as with ice in winter in Michigan, there's no violation of any thermodynamic law here. If there was, we wouldn't have any plants. Okay. So what is in the case of the coneflower in my garden, is there any reason that it would be different, thermodynamically speaking, for the origin of life on this planet or anywhere else in the physical universe? I think not. But you say, yes, Dr. Menzmer, but you left out one very important thing. The seed, right? Because this doesn't happen, that process does not happen without the seed. But guess where the seed lies? We've just left the realm of thermodynamics and went to pathway. Okay? We just went to pathway. The fundamental role of a seed is to provide instructions how to take the non-living material and translate it into a living thing. It contains the instructions, the information is in here to do that. It's all wrapped up in this little package. How to take all that carbon dioxide, water, heat, a few minerals, and certain wavelength of light and turn that into a living system. It's all packaged right in there. It's all about information. And that's the crux of my concern here. So, yes, we've just left the realm of thermodynamics, entered a completely different realm of science, the realm of pathway, or kinetics and mechanism. So the reason life cannot emerge from non-living matter spontaneously is not one of thermodynamics. It's one of pathway. Okay? Allow me to illustrate. Say that I have a massive toothache, maybe an abscess, cheek is puffed out, constant throbbing, low-grade fever. But I have a friend, plumber by trade. He's the best plumber in the country, having worked over decades on countless complex plumbing installations and can fix virtually any plumbing problem. So I have a problem, and I got a friend who knows how to fix them. But will I call him to fix my tooth? No, okay? It's the wrong dude, okay? Now I want a dentist that's as good at dentisting as the plumber is at plumbing, but I got to get the right guy for the job. So with this illustration in mind, and what we've just been considering in our discussion, should we call on thermodynamics to address the problem of a pathway? No, okay, it's a different area. So first, where did the instructions come from? And what are the chances they could have emerged naturalistically? And second, what are the steps in that process of actually bringing that information about? I believe Scripture has answer to the first question, where it came from. God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and the fruit trees bearing fruit which is in their seed. The fruit is in the seed. The instructions are in the seed package. That's where they are. Okay? That's the limitation on why life cannot come spontaneously from non-living material without the pathway, without the instructions. That's where the crux lies. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed according to its kind. There's a specific outcome. When it says according to their kinds, it means there's going to be a specific outcome. So the answer to the second question about trying to figure out how that all happened, I find these interesting quotations. This first one is from, looks like spiritual gifts, 3 spiritual gifts, and the second one is from Ministry of Healing. Men will endeavor to explain from natural causes the work of creation which God has never revealed. But human science cannot search out the secrets of the God of heaven and explain the stupendous works of creation, which were a miracle of almighty power, any sooner than they can explain how God came into existence, the secret things belonging to the Lord our God. The work of creation cannot be explained by science. What science can explain the mystery of life? So, wrapping things up here. What of the origin of the first living systems on this planet? Can we or should we argue as creationists that the second law of thermodynamics proves that life could not arise spontaneously from non-living matter, when it is well known that the issue is not a thermodynamic one, but one in a different realm of scientific understanding altogether, namely that of the pathway? Okay? It's a pathway issue, kinetics and mechanism. Can we make that argument, the thermodynamic argument, without losing our credibility in the eyes of those who work in this field and know better? And should we not be making our appeal on a stronger argument, that of the intractability of the process of the origin of life? All the kindness in the world won't make a bit of difference in attempting to win those who hold a purely materialistic view of science if we lose credibility due to faulty reasons and explanations in support of what we believe about creation. Creation is crucial, but no less crucial are kindness and credibility. Okay? Thank you.